Hey guys, Hamsterwheel here with a new video and welcome to another Mage guide. This time we're tackling Zul'Gurub and everything that comes with this instance. I'll be talking about the strats for bosses, trash mobs and much more. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, just like the Molten Core run, we're gonna start off with topping ourselves up with raid mats, water and consumables if you feel like doing more damage. Once that's all sorted out, it's time to enter the instance. Now the way our guild runs Zul'Gurub is that we skip the first few groups of trash by jumping into the water, jumping onto the bridge and then gathering after that bridge. We mainly do this to save a bit of time, and if you're new and you don't know where to go, then just go ahead and follow the rest of the team. Once we got the people there, it's time for a few trash mobs. Now for these trash mobs there are a few things to keep in mind. First of all, the Akari Priest, which casts a shield that absorbs all magic damage, so when it's up don't bother to try to DPS him, it's useless. He also does an AoE fear, just like a normal priest does, so be sure to keep your distance. Another mob you need to take into consideration is the Axe Thrower. They will occasionally use Axe Flurry, which is a very deadly AoE ability. If the Axe Thrower starts doing this attack, you can sheep that mob in order to interrupt the flurry. Next up we have the Gurabashi Berserker, which has a knockback and an AoE fear just like the Akari Priest. So for this mob you just have to keep your distance and you'll be just fine. Next up we have these packs of mobs which exist out of headhunters, some bats and the Bat Riders. The only mob you really have to watch out for is the Bat Rider, as he will use an ability called Unstable Concoction. This ability does massive AoE damage and should be interrupted by the melee classes. As a mage though, there's not much to remember here. All you have to do is AoE when needed and once again keep your distance. Now during the whole raid you will notice these green coins and blue Bijus dropping. These can be handed in at Yojimba Isle, I will talk about that later on, for reputation, so be sure to need on all of these as they will speed up gaining reputation with the Zandlar tribe. After we got those packs out of the way, it's time to do the first boss, High Priestess Yeklik. This boss has two phases. During the first phase you will stack with the rest of the range. This is to make sure that you will not get charged, as that does a lot of damage. During the first phase, bats will occasionally spawn and go for the ranged group, but they're non-elite and barely do any damage. So when they're close you can just do some AoE damage and then go back to the boss. Phase 2 will start at 50% and at that point the rate spreads out. Keep in mind that when she goes from phase 1 to phase 2, she will reset aggro, so it's best to chill for a few seconds before you start DPSing her again. During phase 2 there will be fire bombs thrown on the ground, and once you see that one is being thrown on the ground where you stand, you run out of the way. Basically, get out of the fire. And that's it for Yeklik, so stack with the other ranged and kill the bats at phase 1, and spread out and dodge the fire at phase 2. After a few more trash mobs, we arrive at the second boss of Zul'Gurub, High Priestess Venoxis. For this boss, the range will spread evenly onto two groups. Basically choose one of the groups and stay close to that group, as you will need to stack together during the first phase. Once the boss is pulled, the ads will usually be tanked separately by an off tank, and you can go ahead and just AoE them down. Once they're dead, move on to the boss and DPS your heart out. During phase 2 the boss will be moved around a bit. All you have to remember is to stay out of the poison, so when you see green stuff, you move. So in a nutshell, go to one of the ranged groups and stack, AoE down the ads and stay out of the green shit when the boss is moved around. After that we got some more trash and then we arrive at High Priestess Marley. This fight for mages is pretty simple. Basically the ranged DPS stacks behind this pillar and when you're in that position you just DPS. Now Marley will occasionally transform into a giant spider, and upon doing so she will silence you for 8 seconds. Yeah, it's pretty nasty. So other than that there's not much worth noting, just DPS and watch your threat. Moving on to the fourth boss, High Priest Thakal. This boss also has two phases. During the first phase everyone will stack behind this pillar and the boss will be pulled by a hunter. Once the tank tagged the boss, you can come out and start to DPS him. At 5% health, the boss will transform into a huge tiger, and that's when phase 2 begins. During this phase, all you need to remember is that he does a knockback now and then, and you can use blink to get into position quickly if he does so. And that's it for Thakal. This fight is pretty easy and shouldn't cause any problems. Now before we move on to the 5th boss, we encounter a new kind of trash mob, the Akari Blood Drinker. It is important to know that these mobs need to be stunned at around 50% health, because if their health gets too low, they will heal themselves and they will stay alive for an eternity. There's basically 2 ways you can kill them. Either stun them at half health and nuke them down, or a warlock will fear him and dot him up. If they're using the second tactic, leave the mob alone, don't do any damage. Alright, and now we arrive at High Priestess Arlok. During this fight there will be ads spawning left and right. The melee will usually take care of those as they die quick and barely do any damage. Arlok herself will occasionally vanish and come back a few seconds later as a transformed panther. When this happens you need to wait for a few seconds with DPS as she resets aggro every time she reappears. During her panther phase she will also do a whirlwind, which can do some nasty AoE damage, so make sure you keep your distance at all time. Once the panther phase is done, she will transform back into a troll, and after a while she will once again vanish and reappear as a panther, and this is pretty much how it goes the entire fight. So, in a nutshell, chill with the DPS when she appears as a panther, and make sure to keep your distance because of the whirlwind. That's it. Now before we get to Jindo, we encounter these mobs that will throw out curses to the entire raid. It is up to you to decurse the raid, starting with the tank. You can also throw out some AoE damage to help kill him, but just keep in mind to prioritize decursing. Alright, now for Jindo the Hexer, there's a few things to keep in mind. First of all, there will be ads spawning from the area behind where the raid will stand. These ads do barely any damage and die very quickly, so if you want to do some extra deeps, you can throw out a quick Cone of Cold or an Arcane Explosion. Second of all, Jindo will spawn both healing and brainwash totems. Both totems need to be killed ASAP, as the brainwash totem in particular is pretty nasty. Normally the melee will have him down in less than 2 seconds. However, if your group is lacking melee, you can try to throw out some quick DPS to help destroy those totems, as they are the priority. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward fight and there's plenty of room for you to DPS your heart out. Time for the big dog, Akari. For this fight the raid will basically spread around him, and as a mage you do need to watch out for the mind control. If someone gets mind controlled during this fight, you can sheep the target so they won't go and charge fellow players and potentially killing them. Other than that, Akari will occasionally use Blood Siphon to drain the raid's life and heal himself. The cool thing about mages is that you can actually prevent this from happening with Ice Block. All you need to do is Ice Block right before he does it, wait for him to cast Blood Siphon, and right after he starts channeling you can cancel your Ice Block and keep on DPSing. And that's pretty much Akari. It's a very easy fight, which is kind of funny considering it's the main boss of this raid. And after that we have one more boss to go, Bloodlord Manicure. Now for Manicure the raid will stand behind these stairs, with the main tank and off tank standing to the other side. One tank will grab Manicure and another tank will grab the Raptor. Once they have been tagged and the tank has positioned Manicure, you can start DPSing. Now during this fight, Bloodlord Manicure will set his focus on a random player in the raid. When that happens, that player needs to stay out of the line of sight before the buff is over. If you don't do that, you will get charged and you will die. Another thing he does is randomly charge to a random player. Yeah, it's very random. This is an instant cast and can't be avoided, unless you're super quick with the ice block. Luckily on this fight you will get rest by the spirits in this area, so you can jump into the fight again. Because of this, it is important that you do not release your spirit. If you do that, you will miss the fight and get left out on the loot, and you don't want that. Another thing Manicure does is a whirlwind, which causes AoE damage to everyone near him. Just make sure you stay away from him when he does that. Now every time Manicure kills someone he levels up, which means he will get stronger. At one point he will be too strong for the main tank to tank, so at that point the tanks and the hunters will start ping-ponging him. Basically they will taunt him so he runs back and forth, not hitting the tanks and the hunters and thus not wiping the raid. During this ping-ponging you can just DPS him down, just make sure you watch your threats. So basically, stay out of the line of sight when you have the debuff, keep your distance and watch your threats. And that's all the bosses and all the trash in Zul'Gurub. Now before I leave you to it, I want to talk about the Zandalar tribe real quick. You see, unlike Molten Core, there's actually a faction that you will gain reputation with when you raid Zul'Gurub that will provide you with some very handy items. You can find this faction on Yojamba Isle, just off of the shore of Stranglethorn Vale. Here you can get quests from Zul'Gurub and hand in the coins and the bee juice you've collected for extra reputation. There's also 3 armor items you can get as a mage: the bracers, the shoulders, and the robes. You can also get a necklace and a trinket, but they're not really worth going for. However, the bracers, shoulders, and robe are in fact pretty good. The bracers require friendly reputation, the shoulders require honored, and the robe requires revered reputation. Once you're exalted, you'll also be able to get a shoulder enchant for plus 18 spell power, which is really damn good and an absolute must-have for any serious raider. One more thing I'd like to talk about are the idols. Both Jindo and Mandakir will drop 1 Akari idol. What this gives is a leg or shoulder enchant that will give you an extra plus 18 spell power and plus 8 hit rating. This again is a very good enchant and you should definitely try to get your hands on one of them. Keep in mind that you can only really get a chance at winning one of these if you have a best in slot item for either your head, legs, or both. For mages it is the Spellweaver's Turban for the head and the Bloodvine leggings for the legs. Alright, and that's it for Zul'Gurub. I've talked about the bosses, the trash mobs, and gave you some quick info about the faction that you will gain reputation with as you do Zul'Gurub, and the amazing awards this faction can give you. Now all that is left to do is for you to join Zul'Gurub and once again make the YMCA proud. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm Hamsterwheel and have a good one.